They shoved him out like he was nothing. A tired old man with scars no one could see, except on his hands, and maybe in his eyes, if anyone had bothered to look. Security risk, they said, making passengers uneasy. But he didn't yell. He didn't fight. He just picked up his torn duffel bag and walked back into the rain. What the guards didn't know, what nobody there knew, was that 20 years ago, this man had pulled someone very important from the wreckage of a burning Humvee. And that man, he still remembered. And when he found out what happened here, everything stopped. His name was Ray Mercer, 63 years old, though his body moved like it was older, and his memory often felt younger, like it was stuck in a loop somewhere in Fallujah, 2004. Most days, Ray tried not to think too hard. He stuck to a routine. Up before dawn. Coffee from the gas station on 5th. 2 sugars, no cream. Then he'd head to Union Central Bus Terminal. Take the second bench from the left and sit. Watch. Wait. Not for anyone. Just wait. The terminal was dry. That's all that mattered. Ray wasn't homeless in the way people imagined. He had a room at the Hillstone shelter. Bunk 17, a locker with a busted door. But he never stayed long, never let his guard down around too many people. The shelter was loud, and when it was loud, his brain went to dark places. So the terminal became his quiet battlefield. He'd sit there with his back straight, hands folded on his lap like he was guarding something. Maybe he was. Maybe that's all he knew how to do anymore. He didn't talk much, except to the janitor sometimes. Old guy named Dennis who always gave Ray a nod and a bottle of water. Dennis was one of the few who didn't look at Ray like he was invisible. Or worse, like he was dangerous. Most people did, though. He'd gotten used to it. The glances, the sidesteps, the mothers pulling their kids in close when they passed him. He didn't blame them, not really. Society didn't make room for men like him anymore. Ray had once been a staff sergeant, U.S. Army, 3 tours. He'd carried bleeding bodies out of twisted metal, survived 2 IED blasts, and held a young private's hand as he bled out in the desert heat. And for a while, those things had meant something. But when the uniform came off, the world forgot him fast. Now people saw the fraying coat, the boots worn thin, and they assumed. Drunk, crazy, dangerous. Never mind the bronze star in a box under his bunk, or the years he gave. That didn't. What Ray wanted, though he'd never admit it out loud, was peace. Just a little dignity. To exist without being treated like a ghost, or worse, a threat. But dignity was a luxury in a place like this. Especially when your life fit into a canvas bag and your past only existed in your own head. That morning had started like any other. The sky was overcast, the streets wet from a night of cold spring rain. Ray had found his usual seat at the terminal. Quiet, routine, safe. But by noon, everything would change. And it would start with a voice yelling, "Sir, step aside." Now. It started like a ripple, a few people turning their heads, a sharp voice cutting through the low hum of foot traffic, the kind of voice that makes people instinctively reach for their phones, not to help, but to record. Ray looked up. A man in a TSA security uniform, young, clean-shaven, tense, was standing just a few feet away. His name tag read M. Peters. Ray hadn't done anything, hadn't moved. Just sat where he always did, quiet and still. "You can't loiter here," Peters barked. "This area's for ticketed passengers only." Ray opened his mouth to respond, slow and careful, like he was diffusing something. "Just sitting, not bothering anybody." Peters didn't care. He gestured wide and loud. "We've had complaints about your presence. Folks say you're making them uncomfortable." There it was. That word again. Uncomfortable. Ray had heard it so many times it didn't even sting anymore. It just settled into his chest, like old smoke. "I'm not asking again," Peters continued, now joined by a second agent. "You need to leave the premises, now." Ray stood slowly, not defiant, resigned. He picked up his duffel bag, heavy with things that only mattered to him: a battered canteen, a few MREs, a photo of a squad in desert gear, edges curled with age. He didn't argue, didn't raise his voice, but as he stepped forward, the second agent reached for his arm. That's when someone said, "Hey, don't touch him." A woman had stepped out from the crowd, late 20s maybe, sharp black glasses, holding her phone up and recording. Her name was Lila Novak, freelance journalist, commuting to an interview across town. She didn't know Ray, had never seen him before today, but something in the way he moved, quiet, heavy, proud, pulled at something in her. "This is wrong," she said, voice trembling. "He's not doing anything." Peter shot her a glance. "Ma'am, please don't interfere. This man is sitting. You're throwing him out because of how he looks." Now more phones were up. People shifting, watching, whispers beginning. Lila kept recording as Ray was led toward the exit like a criminal. One of the guards muttered something about mental health cases. Another said, "They always come around here to loiter." Ray's head stayed down. He didn't want this. Not the cameras, not the attention. He just wanted it to be over. He stepped into the cold, rainy street outside. His coat didn't keep out the wind like it used to. His boots soaked through in minutes. He didn't look back. Inside, Lila stopped recording. Her hands were shaking. She didn't know why this moment struck her so hard. She'd seen things like this before. But something about him haunted her. It didn't feel right to just put the phone away and move on. She sat down, rewound the video, and watched it again. Then she opened her email, typed a few lines, and attached the file. She hesitated just for a second before hitting send. The address in the to line wasn't random. It was Governor Elijah Monroe's direct contact. She'd interviewed him 2 years ago during a campaign stop. Still had the email thread. She didn't expect anything to come of it. But maybe, just maybe, someone would care. What she didn't know, what no one knew, was that Governor Monroe wasn't just any politician. He was a former Army lieutenant, retired after an ambush in Iraq nearly ended his life, and Ray Mercer had carried him out of that ambush on his back. Governor Elijah Monroe wasn't a man who startled easily. He'd seen things, done things, that most politicians would never understand. Behind his polished suits and calm cadence was a soldier who had once spent nights shaking under a desert sky, praying his unit would make it to dawn. So when his aide forwarded him the video, at first he didn't even look at it. Hundreds of clips came across his desk every week. People complaining about city services, protesting a tax bill, begging for attention. But something about the subject line made him pause. Homeless vet publicly removed from station. Look closely. He clicked play. There, on the screen, was a hunched man in a gray field jacket. Quiet, weathered, mistreated. Monroe felt the shame rise in his chest before he even fully recognized him. The grainy clip shook slightly, a crowd forming, the woman's voice challenging the guards. The man never raised his voice, never resisted. He just endured it. Monroe leaned closer. Then he froze. That face, those eyes. Suddenly, he wasn't in his office anymore. He was 25 again, bleeding from his shoulder, lying in the burning wreckage of a Humvee outside Mosul. The heat was unbearable. The air tasted like metal. Screams in the distance. He remembered thinking it was over, until 2 arms, strong, sure, grabbed him from behind and hauled him through the fire. Monroe had blacked out halfway through, but he remembered the voice, gravel-thick and calm. Stay with me, sir. I got you. Ray Mercer. He had never forgotten the name. Monroe's breath caught. His eyes stung suddenly, violently. He hadn't seen Ray since that day. Had tried to track him down after the war, but Ray had disappeared, filed discharge papers, then vanished. Now here he was, tossed into the street like garbage by people who had no idea who they were touching. Monroe stood. "Get my driver," he said. "Now!" His aides followed, confused, as he stormed out of the office. He didn't say where he was going, didn't explain. Within 15 minutes, the black SUV pulled up outside Union Central Terminal. Monroe stepped out in a dark wool coat, his face hard. Cameras caught him almost immediately. Someone recognized him. People murmured. Phones went up. "Where is the man from this morning?" he asked, loud enough to carry across the station floor. The security agent, startled, hesitated. "Where is he?" Peters came forward, confused and defensive. "Sir, that man was causing a disturbance. We followed protocol." "Protocol?" Monroe's voice sliced through the terminal. "Your protocol is to humiliate a veteran who served this country better than most of us ever will?" The room went still. "I want your names, your supervisor's name, and I want every minute of security footage from this morning preserved. If anything gets deleted, I will know." Monroe turned. "Find him!" His aides scattered. But Ray wasn't far. He had only made it to the edge of the block, sitting on the curb with his duffel bag between his knees, staring at the pavement. Monroe crossed the street himself, no cameras, no entourage, just him. He approached slowly, heart pounding. "Ray?" Ray looked up, confused. Then something flickered in his eyes. Recognition. "Sir?" he asked quietly. Monroe knelt beside him. "No more, sir." "Ray." "Not today." He reached into his coat and pulled out his personal coin, a military tradition. On the back was engraved a simple line, "For the one who carried me home." "I've waited 20 years to thank you," Monroe said. "I'm sorry it took this long." Ray didn't say anything, just stared at the coin, then back at Monroe. For the first time in years, someone saw him. Not just his face, not just the rough clothes, but him. Monroe stood up and turned to the cameras, now gathering across the street. "This man saved my life, and today, the city failed him. That ends now." The news cycle exploded within hours. Footage of Governor Monroe standing in the rain beside a homeless veteran, his rescuer, played on every local station, and within a day, it hit national headlines. Governor reunites with man who saved his life, 20 years later. But to Ray Mercer, all the noise felt like it belonged to someone else's story. He wasn't used to being seen, let alone honored. The day after the confrontation at the terminal, Monroe called him directly. Not through aides, not through press. Just him. He invited Ray to meet at the governor's office for a private conversation. No cameras. Ray hesitated at first, but something in Monroe's voice, steady, earnest, familiar, made him say yes. When Ray walked into that polished office 2 days later, he didn't recognize himself in the mirror anymore. He was in clean clothes, a fresh shave, and boots that didn't leak. A quiet nonprofit Monroe had co-founded had stepped in almost overnight. Housing, food, medical help. No headlines about it, no photo ops, just action. "I don't want pity," Ray told Monroe, sitting across from him, back straight. "Just wanted to be left alone." Monroe nodded. "I know, but you don't deserve to be alone, Ray. Not after all you gave." For once, Ray didn't deflect. He just sat with the words. Let them settle. Within weeks, things started to shift. The terminal updated its policy. Mandatory sensitivity training for staff, with specific emphasis on veteran outreach. The agents involved in the incident were reassigned pending review. Monroe made sure the training didn't just check boxes, It was written by people like Ray, veterans, survivors, humans who'd been forgotten by the systems they once fought to protect. Ray didn't suddenly become a celebrity. He didn't want that. But people started nodding when they saw him, offering a seat instead of avoiding eye contact. One morning, the janitor Dennis handed him a cup of coffee and said, "You're the guy, huh? The one from the news?" Ray just smiled. "I'm still me." But even that was a shift. Lila Novak, the journalist who recorded the video, published a column a few weeks later. It wasn't just about Ray. It was about how easily we look away, how quickly we judge, how often we forget that people like Ray don't want charity, they want humanity. Ray kept the coin Monroe gave him tucked deep into his duffel bag. Every now and then, he'd take it out and just look at it. Not because he needed reminding of what he'd done, but because, for the first time in a long time, someone else remembered too. And maybe that was the whole point. Not that the world owed him something, but that it finally saw him as he was. A man who carried others through fire, and just wanted to walk the rest of the way with dignity. Ray's story isn't just about one veteran. It's about every person we pass by without a second glance. Every soul who once carried the weight of this country and now just wants to be seen. If this story moved you, even just a little, don't let it stop here. Tap like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the next story. And if you know someone who needs to hear this, share it with them. Your support helps us keep telling the kinds of stories that matter. The quiet ones, the forgotten ones, the true ones. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.